In this episode, how to record a live event from a mixing board. For those of us that record sound, at some point we will be asked, hey, can you record this live event that's coming up? We're going to have live sound and we need someone to record it. How do you do that? So if you show up at a live event and you go talk to the sound engineer at the mixing board and say, hey, can I record this? I've got my recorder. You need to understand you're asking a huge favor of this person. This is something that is stressful for them because they've got a lot of other stuff going on. They're generally nervous about working with people who have never really done sound before or who have never recorded from a mixing board before. They don't want you to mess up what they're being paid to do. So you need to be super respectful and you need to come prepared to manage all the things that need to be managed and make their job as easy as possible. So if you've been asked by the organizer of the event to do the recording, ask the event organizer if they can also put you in touch with the mixer ahead of time so you can make arrangements ahead of time. That'll make things a lot less stressful for the sound engineer who's going to be doing the live sound for that event, because they'll know ahead of time what's coming, and you can talk about what cables you need to get a feed from their board. So of course, you need to bring all of the cables necessary to connect your recorder to their mixing board from a line out on the board. You also need to make sure that you have ample power for your recording gear. Now, another thing that can be very stressful for sound engineers is if someone comes up and wants to record on the spot and says, hey, can I plug in my recorder here somewhere? And they have a power strip which has enough outlets for their own gear and they don't necessarily have room for your gear, or even if they do have another outlet for your particular recorder, they may not want you plugging into it because there's always a risk that when you're done, you might pull out the wrong thing. All sorts of stuff can go wrong. So they get very, very cagey about someone coming up to them and asking all these things. So if you can, stick to battery power and bring enough battery supply so that you can make it through the entire part of the show or entire show that you're going to record. Okay, now into the mechanics. First of all, you're going to need a recorder, and you're going to need a recorder preferably that has an XLR or TRS quarter-inch input that can do line level. Now, if you're not sure if yours can, here's an example. This is the Tascam DR60D Mark II. You can see it has two inputs on the side here that are XLR or quarter-inch TRS. Those cables look like this. Now, it's also important that your recorder is capable of switching those inputs to be line level inputs as opposed to microphone level inputs. Now, some recorders cannot do that. Now, of course, you also need cables to make this happen. There are a variety of different types of outputs on different mixing boards, so it's going to depend on the mixing board, and that's where things start to get a little more complicated and people start to get scared. It's not that big of a deal. Let me explain. The most common kind of cable that they're going to output from their board is a quarter-inch TRS that looks like this. So if you get a cable that has the quarter-inch TRS on one side and whatever your recorder needs on the other side, either XLR or TRS quarter-inch, then you should be all set. In some cases, a mixer will have an XLR output, so you're going to need an XLR cable that looks like this. This is the same as a standard XLR microphone cable. They're interchangeable. You can use them, no problem. Some recorders only have an XLR input, and so in that case, you're going to need cables that have quarter-inch TRS on one side for the mixer and XLR on the other for your recorder. And then finally, in some cases, some boards have what are called RCA connectors for the output, and those look like this. So you'll need an RCA to quarter-inch set of cables as well. Now, we also mentioned before you're going to need to power your recorder for the duration of the shoot, however long that's going to be. And I would recommend that you stick to batteries. The reason for that is, again, it makes it a lot less stressful for the sound engineer at the mixing board because they don't have someone fumbling around with their power connectors, which can put them out of business very quickly. With the Tascam DR60D Mark II, for example, you can power this with a USB input. So I can use a USB battery bank to power the DR60D for probably 15 hours. Now, if you are going to be recording, say, for example, all day, and you don't have enough battery to supply you for that entire time, bring your own extension cable and your own power strip so that you're not, again, stressing out the sound engineer at the mixing board. Now, one issue that occurs from time to time in live sound settings is what is called a ground loop. When there's a ground loop in the sound system, you often hear an annoying buzz or hum in the loudspeakers or in your recording. This is often caused by plugging some of the equipment into one electrical circuit and some of the other sound equipment into a separate circuit. To address this, you may want to add an isolating transformer box to your kit. This sounds all technical, but basically it's just a box that you will insert between the mixer and your recorder, and it eliminates or greatly reduces any hum. You'll need an additional cable to make this work. The input on one side will require a male XLR cable and on the outside, a female XLR. This is another reason why I recommend powering your recorder with batteries, because using batteries greatly reduces the risk of this ever occurring in the first place. Once you have all this in place, how do you connect it up? First of all, you need to find out whether or not the engineer was mixing in mono or stereo. Now, for a lot of us, for example, if you're doing a wedding and you're just talking to the DJ and you're just mainly interested in recording perhaps a ceremony or the speeches at the reception or things of that nature, you really only need a mono signal anyway. And the reality is, for most smaller shows, they're only mixing in mono anyway. So in that case, you only need one cable. If it is a bigger production and they are doing a stereo mix, then you'll want 2 cables. Next up is to figure out the type of cable you need. The sound engineer will tell you what type of connector they need on their end. And again, the most common is going to be 1/4-inch TRS. So once they've identified the type of connector they need on their end, you give that to them and let them do the configuration. They get very cagey about you trying to touch their board generally, so don't try to do it yourself. Then of course, knowing your recorder, you know what type of connector you need on the other end, so you plug that into your recorder. Next, you'll want to be there for sound check-in as much as possible so that you can set the levels on your recorder, so you don't have to fiddle with that as much during the actual show itself. Then of course, once the show's ready to start, you hit record and you're on your way. Now, one sort of intermediate note, the first time you record a live event from a mixer, you'll be a little surprised and maybe disappointed at the sound you get. You'll think, wow, that sounds really dead, like there's not a lot going on there, and you can't hear the crowd when they clap in between songs if it's a concert, and things of that nature. And what is also happening is you're not capturing very much of the room. So it sounds kind of lifeless. What you can do in that case is you can also put up a couple of microphones in the room itself so you can capture all that, or perhaps on your camera, whatever it is you're doing. And that way you can mix some of the room sound and the audience clapping and responding to the performance to make it a little bit more lifelike. So these are the sort of basics. Under most circumstances, this should be able to get you where you need to go. If not, you have some sort of special circumstance, go ahead and leave a question down below and we'll do our best to answer that. If you have not already subscribed, make sure you do that, and we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. And if you'd like to be notified each time a new video comes out, go ahead and click that bell icon. We'll talk to you soon.